Hello, hello. This is the Maya Artifact episode number 3587. Today's date is September 12, 2025. It's been almost like a night at 10:23. Sorry, 33 p.m. All right. I just ate my dinner. Okay, and I'm kind of like a little bit of late. I usually record Artifact at say 9:30 or things like that, but I spent a little bit time with my family, so that's all. All right, so should we jump directly to the question? All right, let's go. All right, the question is how, do I have feedback loop in place of improve continuously? Okay, what is actually feedback loop and things like that? Okay, let me give you kind of like a clarity of the question. Okay, first of all is that this is question is actually associated with the business and startup. Okay, I wanted to establish a business and startup, and I want to know how do I supposed to do that, because I am not a graduate person. I haven't really done any kind of like MBA, nothing really at all. Asking this question to myself so that I would be aware of that what will gonna happen and how do I supposed to execute the problem will I face and things like that. Alright. Now regarding about this question is actually focus on growing your business and stuff like that. Now this question is a kind of like a very, like, it's not associate only with the kind of like a business point of perspective. It kind of like a, it associate with a multiple reason, it associate, no, it's kind of like a somebody connect with a lot of things. You just have to kind of like a look through that. Okay, what is exactly feedback loop? Okay, and that's a really good thing, dude. Okay, let me explain what is exactly feedback loop, and it's really good. You probably knew it. Okay, but you haven't really kind of like seen it, or you haven't really, like, you don't really heard about it, but you actually did it. Okay, what is that? Let me kind of like give you example. Okay, let's just say you are a chef. Okay, or you run a bakery. Okay, you make a cake. And then you kind of like sell that cake to the customer. Okay, now basically is this thing now, sometimes customer will actually give you feedback regarding about how the cake is good or not, right? Okay, most of the customer will not gonna give the feedback. Okay, but if you ask them politely that key, this is my cake and I try this new cake, new flavored and things like that, I need your opinion. So basically the customer also feel really good. Okay, they also kind of like give like a, basically if you ask them that key, just basically being polite. Okay, being polite and say that key, like, this is kind of like a new recipe, and I need your opinion regarding about this cake. Okay, so bunch of customer will kind of like give you very valid opinion. Okay, some of the people says that ki, yeah, this cake is really good, really great. Some of the people will gonna say, "Mm, I didn't really like it," or things like that. Okay, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that ki, I made a cake, and I kind of like simply circulate that cake or sell that cake, or kind of like simply give the compliment this cake to the my customer, and kind of like ask for opinion. Okay, and I kind of like simply, and I get the opinion almost like 100 from the hundreds of people. Okay, and from the hundreds of people, most of people says this cake is good, great things, and that and that. All right, some people might gonna say that the texture of the cake is kind of like a really dry. So they feel something like that. Okay, now let me tell you one thing. Now you actually kind of like went to people's. Okay, now basically your customer are kind of like a normal people. Okay, obviously they are not like a really expert in kind of like a cooking or things like that. Okay, or they don't really have any kind of like a prior expertise regarding about what is actually cake and things like that. They just know they have to eat the cake and that's it. Okay, but whatever, you will kind of like a really get little bit of kind of like a simply feedback. Okay, one feedback that you get is that the cake feel little bit of dry, so you actually add milk. Okay, you actually add milk to kind of like make the cake little bit of soft. Okay, so what is actually happened, that you kind of like add the milk, make the cake little bit of soft, and then you serve again. Okay, and those people will gonna say, yeah, this look also really good and things like that. Okay, now try to understand this process. Okay, you try something new. Okay, try. Okay, you try something new, try. Okay, now you serve this cake to the customer. Okay, so basically it's a kind of like a something is this thing that key serve this customer to the kind of like a something practice, or kind of like a something that key you serve this customer and people are actually giving you feedback. Okay, it is kind of like a something is this thing. Okay, it's I'm not really sure what is actually the cycle, but cycle is that key you make something cake, you show it to the customer actually give you feedback, and you actually kind of like a because of this feedback you kind of like a simply try to improve the cake again. Okay, then you improve the cake, you actually serve to the customers kind of like a bunch of customers says this is not good, this is really like a, whatever the kind of like a some feedback that you think it's valid, kind of like a work on that, improve the cake again and serve the customer again. So this is called kind of like a assembly cycle, and that cycle called feedback loop cycle. Okay, this is very very essential not only for kind of like a something running a business, but as well as it kind of like a something essential for everything. Like let's just say you are artist, you are kind of like a something work, everything, like everything. Okay, whatever you have to do, you kind of like show it to the people that did I make good, did I kind of like assembly whatever the stuff that I make is right or not, or things like that. Okay, now let me tell you one thing. Okay, regarding about my experience and things like that. Okay, that key you will not gonna get kind of like a something very valid customer or very valid opinion or feedback. Okay, let me tell you one thing. Feedback is a kind of like a something very crucial and very important. Okay, and the feedback, the only people will actually give you very genuine feedback is a person who is kind of like associated with that particular process. Let me give you example. Let's just say that ki, I make a cake, I serve to my customer actually give me very confusing feedback. Okay, and some of the people say this not really good and things and that, because of the feedback is literally confusing, so you don't know what should you supposed to improve. Okay, like as I mentioned that he, like basically the milk is not like the cake feel little bit of dry, so you have to add milk or things like that. Okay, this is kind of like a okay, but not every time you will get kind of like that kind of like a opinion. Why? Because customer are not the kind of like a somebody PS person who are kind of like a somebody thinks that ki what makes cake good. They don't know that. They just only thinks that ki they just wanted to eat the cake and that's it. Okay, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing. Instead of going to the customer, go to the kind of like a somebody another chef or another kind of like a cake maker and kind of like show it to them. Okay, or kind of like give them try and give their opinion. So basically when you kind of like show your kind of like a product to the such a people who is already expert in that particular field, they actually give you very valid kind of like a somebody expert advice regarding about feedback, really expert feedback regarding about everything, like what kind of like ingredient that you use, what volume, what kind of like a things. Okay, everything, and you will kind of like understand even more. Okay, so this is the way that you could do that. But still, okay, as I mentioned, even if you went to the kind of like a somebody person who is kind of like a bit really expert and things like that, so there is also possibility that that particular person which is kind of like a somebody which is also in equal field, that particular person will utilize your idea to improve his cake. Okay, because he is also a chef and things like that. So this is what it is. Okay, feedback loop is a kind of like a somebody very very kind of like a things that it's kind of like a somebody very difficult to get. Okay, because you don't really get kind of like a very valid person and things like that. But still, what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that key, ask your customer, ask like whoever the person around you and things like that. You just okay. But what I'm trying to tell you, okay, like a kind of like a somebody you can do that thing. You can kind of like go to the chef, you can go to the customer and things and try to get the very valid feedback that you kind of like a get and things like that. Okay, I kind of like a somebody what I do. Okay, okay, let me tell you one thing. I also a content creator. I also make a kind of like a simply content for YouTube. My content is also regarding about graphic designing and things like that. Okay, Now whatever the design that I make, okay, yeah, I also check that key is my design is really good or not, or things like that. So basically what I do is that instead of asking people, or instead of asking to my audience or things like that, I would kind of like simply ask this thing to AI, like artificial intelligence. There are a lot of AI. ChatGPT actually give you a lot of really good feedback. Okay, yeah, Gemini or a lot of kind of like a really good feedback. Okay, they actually give you really good feedback. Okay, so basically I upload my design over there, and kind of like a things that what is actually your opinion, give me the ratings regarding about things and that, and also kind of like a tell me how do I supposed to improve, tell me the pattern, tell me the color texture, tell me the details, tell me the everything that how do I supposed to improve and things like that. Okay, so basically ChatGPT, or yeah, mostly ChatGPT is kind of like a giving me kind of like a something very entire list regarding about how do you supposed to improve and things like that. Now regarding about that, some of the kind of like some improvement that I can't do it because time constraint and things and that, but some of the things that I could do, like a change the color or change the things or that. Okay, yeah. So, and sometimes now kind of like some ChatGPT is actually kind of like a generate the advanced version of this particular image, that key you should supposed to make this design like this, and sometimes it look really good too. Okay, yeah. So this is the way that I'm actually improve my content every single day. Okay, yeah. So this is called kind of like a feedback loop. All right. um and now I'm not really sure that if you made a cake, then you kind of like suddenly serve to the AI, the AI will not gonna kind of like understand that, they will not gonna eat the cake. Okay, so probably you have to go to the customer and shave and things like that, but still like I don't know, I'm trying to explain what is actually feedback loop and things like that. Feedback loop is a kind of like a things that you kind of like show it to the customer, get the feedback, try to improve, show it to the customer and things like that, and this is called kind of like a feedback loop and things like that. Okay, same thing happened with a kind of like a simply company. Okay, yeah, like basically whatever the product or services that you are doing. Okay, yeah, you are kind of like a ask for customer or your user to kind of like a simply what is actually kind of like a do you like our services or things or that or something like that. People give you kind of like a really valid opinion and things and that, work on that, try to improve, try again. Okay, yeah, people love it. It kind of like a feels that na, ki when you kind of like a when you do this kind of like a feedback things like that, you actually improve your content or you actually improve whatever you actually have. Okay, yeah, one thing. Another thing is that ki when you do this thing with your kind of like a customer or when you user, the user feel little bit of value. User feels like that ki no, this person is kind of like a really genuine person, and he does really respect our kind of like opinion and things like that. So that particular user is also kind of like a connected, that user particular user is also really connected with me, with my service and things like that, and he is also kind of like a give you very valid opinion regarding about every point of perspective. So this is the way that you do na, it kind of like a take advantage not only to you, but other will gonna get kind of like a value to other, will kind of like a feels like it kind of like a win-win situation for both the side. Okay, so if you do this thing, that is called kind of like a feedback loop, and it's really good for kind of like a improve and things like that. But still, as I mentioned, feedback is a kind of like a something very kind of like a thing that na, ki people are kind of like a take it something wrong or things like that. Okay, yeah, like what I'm trying to tell you is this thing na, ki you have to be kind of like a something aware of such a situation. What kind of like a situation is that ki some people might gonna criticize. Okay, yeah, so you have that kind of like a simply power or things that you have to be survive that criticism. Okay, and it's a kind of like a simply very essential thing. Okay, because you are really polite and you are actually asking them very nicely regarding about what is actually my cake and give me your feedback and things like that. People might gonna criticize about beside cake, he gonna criticize about everything, they gonna criticize about that key, like lot of stuff and things like that. Okay, yeah, because like basically it is too much. Yeah, like basically I'm living in India and usually criticism is actually get very easily. Okay, yeah, so you have to be kind of like a simply aware of that key. almost like a 70% is kind of like a criticism that you will gonna get. So you have to be kind of like a cautious regarding about stuff. Okay, so this is what it is. I wanted to record much more, but I don't really feel good. Okay, yeah, it's just like that key. It is a lot of water in my stomach, and it kind of like a simply just see. Have you ever listening? This is tupuk tupuk. Okay. Whatever. I'm gonna end here. All right. This is it. And thank you.